now what, where to get started when getting a new research project off the ground. So we're here today to discuss what happens once you've successfully gotten a grant and how you get access to your funds, how you hire graduate students, how you deal with your financial obligations, and what you need to know about research ethics and the process involved there. Okay, I'll be passing the floor to my co-presenters as I go along, but I just wanted to introduce and thank for their expertise. Amy Taylor from the Office of the Vice President, Research and Innovation, Paige Sowerby, Office of Research Finance, and also Harmony Peach from the Office of Research Ethics, sorry. This presentation has really been a group effort to put together, so I'm really thankful to all of them for devoting some time to this. I'm going to start today with a land acknowledgement. The University of Windsor sits on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. We respect the long-standing relationships with First Nations people in this place in the 100-mile Windsor-Essex Peninsula and the Straits Le Detroit of Detroit. Since this is a virtual session, you may be joining us from another place, so we encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional territories where you are located. And just to give a quick accessibility statement too, as I mentioned at the beginning, this session is going to be recorded. I am going to make both the video recording and a transcript available on the ORIS website after the presentation, possibly not until Monday, bear with me. But I will email the link to everybody who signed up for the session so that you know where to find it if you want to review the materials later, or if it's easier for you to review using an adaptive technology or in a more accessible format. If you would like to turn on live captions for this presentation, you can use the More Actions menu. That's usually shows up as 3 dots with the words more under it. In your Teams window, from the drop-down menu, you can select Turn on Live Captions, and they'll appear along the bottom of the screen. Okay. Quick note about what we're going to cover today. These are the areas that we're going to look at. We're going to take around an hour for this presentation. We have allocated time at the end, about 30 minutes, hopefully, for a question and answer period. I am going to ask you to hang on to your questions to the end, but if you want to post them in the chat so you don't forget what they are, totally fine. So today we're going to be covering accessing your research funding, how to get your research cleared, how to hire research personnel. So that's going to include both students and non-students, and also understanding your financial obligations and responsibilities when it comes to your grant funding and your reporting responsibilities. So the goal of today's session is to help you figure out what to do once you've got a grant. But if you're not sure how to get started in applying for grants, we're here to help. So the Office of Research and Innovation Services, our whole reason for being is to help you access grant funding and write high quality grant applications. We have specialists in your discipline who can help you create the best proposal possible. The earlier that you get in touch with your research coordinator to start preparing a proposal, the more support we're able to give you. So I've given a list here of who you should contact depending on what discipline you're working in. But if you're ever unsure of who you should be talking to, you can also go to uwindsor.ca/ORIS for more information. Or you can contact us at oris@uwindsor.ca. Our office, it's worth knowing, also offers a number of seed grants that can help you establish your research programs, especially if you're a new member of faculty. And these seed grants are really useful to helping you get ready to pursue larger grants, for example, tri-agency grants. Okay, so I want to talk about the first step. So you've got a notice of award in your hands. It's very exciting. To access your funding, you have to make sure that all your approvals are in order. So we use a web-based portal called ERSO, that stands for Electronic Research Services Office, to manage the approvals of your process of your project. You should be submitting a file in the ERSO portal when you apply for your grant, not waiting until you've got your notice of award. Because it's not the only step that has to be undertaken. But once you've got your notice of award, you can then either attach it to your existing ERSO record or email it to your research coordinator. Either way, it will reach us. And at that point, we'll take over making sure that your documentation is in order, and we'll get your research grant account set up for you. I do want to note that if you wait until after you've got your notice of award to create your ERSO file, there can sometimes be delays. And that might impede you getting started on your research. So the sooner that you complete your ERSO record, the better. And we absolutely would like you to do it at the time that you submit your grant application and not wait till afterwards. So when you receive a notice of award, your funds are transferred to the University of Windsor and have to be deposited into a research grant account. Once we have your notice of award, like I said, we'll take care of the rest. If there's missing information, we'll be in touch with you to make sure that, like if there are outstanding documents or that kind of thing, or if there's any information that we need, we'll be in contact with you to take care of that. We do our best to keep you informed throughout the process of getting your grant up and running. So do be aware that you might get copied on quite a few emails. I promise that we will not be offended if you use like an inbox filter to just park them all into a folder. But it's important to remember that those emails do contain really important and useful information. So when we request that your grant account get open, you'll get copied on that email so you know that it's in the pipeline. And then when your grant account is ready, you'll receive another email from the Research Finance Office. It has 2 documents attached that are very important. One is a copy of the budget, and one is a letter that contains your grant information. So you'll need the 2 numbers that I've circled in red here to complete like things like hiring packages and stuff like that. So it is important to keep track of those documents. And the 2 numbers that I've circled there are, number 1 is your department code. That's a 4-digit code. Every department has one, and it helps our finance system identify where you are so that money gets charged to the right place. And then and that's always going to be 4 digits. And then the second number is your project number. This may also get called your grant account number. It's always going to be 6 digits, and it will start with the number 8. Okay, a word about research contracts. So research contracts and purchase orders and things like that you arrange directly with an industry or community partner are a great and important part of research funding. We treat them exactly the same, more or less, to how we treat competitive grants and awards, in that they all require the same approvals and oversight. So that means they have to get signed off on by your department head and also your dean. Now, it's really important to be aware that research contracts bind not just you as the researcher, but also the university to the terms of the contract. Please do not sign off on your own research contracts. They have to be reviewed and signed off by a representative of the university. Vesna Capps, my colleague at ORIS, is our contracts manager. Her job is to make sure that your contracts do what they need to do, that they comply with University of Windsor policies. And the sooner you get in touch with Vesna, and you're going to hear this a lot, the sooner you get in touch with us, the better we can support you through this process. Please don't wait until the last minute. Our review process is not always immediate, and our due diligence is really important. So if you're in touch with us, again, at the beginning of the process, there are going to be fewer delays or disruptions to your project. Okay, before I pass you over in a moment to my colleague from the ethics office, I want to make sure that you know how important it is to know the university's policies, especially for new faculty. I know that you guys are getting a lot of information thrown at you, but it's important to know not just how to spend your research funds, but what you're allowed to spend them on and what your obligations are as a researcher. So please take some time to get to know our research policies. The responsibilities of principal investigators policy is a great starting place to get to know what we're expecting of you. Submission of proposal documents by principal investigators will tell you a little bit more about what you can do with ORIS. And the establishment of research grant or contract account policies will give you a little bit more insight about what to expect from the process of opening your account. It's also really important that you're familiar with the research overhead policy, the university's purchasing policy, the university's travel expense policy, and the university's gift acceptance policy if you're looking for donations that support your research. The most current version of university policies can always be found at the university's Central Policies Index, which is at uwindsor.ca/policies. Now, some of these are research policies and some of them are finance policies, but the Central Policies Index has all of them. If you are planning to apply for NSERC, SSHRC, or CIHR funds, it's also important that you are familiar with the guidelines in the Tri-Agency Guide on Financial Administration, because those guidelines bind us as an institution as well. Okay, so quick introduction to clearances. What I mean when I say clearances or sometimes certifications or permits is the process you have to go through to make sure that your research is being conducted in a safe and ethical manner. There are 3 general types of clearances that may impact your project. Those are research ethics, research safety, which encompasses biohazards, radioactive materials and environmental risks, and animal care. If any of these apply to your research, you absolutely must obtain your clearance before you're able to access your funds. Harmony is going to talk to you about ethics clearances in depth today, but if you anticipate your research involving safety risks or you're going to be working with animal participants, please make sure you get to know the rules and regulations and contact the right office. I have given you all 3 email addresses here. Before I hand it over to Harmony, I just want to mention the partial release of funds process. So in a case where you require a clearance, but let's say maybe you need to hire a grad student to help you prepare your ethics application, or maybe you have an expense that you have to incur before the clearance is needed. Like an example, maybe you need to purchase a software and get trained on it so that you can be ready to collect data from focus groups, for example. This is where you might want to request a partial release of funds. Typically, we release up to 30% of your funds as long as you have clearly identified your pre-clearance needs. You do have to complete the relevant clearance before you can access the rest of your funding. But if your research doesn't require a clearance to like year 2 of the work, you can also complete a declaration of compliance before confirming to confirm that you are aware of your obligations to clear your project before the relevant phase begins. Harmony is going to talk a little bit more about that process. I really want to note on this timeline that I'm showing you here that where you complete a form, the board approves it, ORIS approves it, you get your funds. That approval from the right board, whether it's ethics, animal care, or research safety, always comes first before the form is approved by research services. ORIS will never ever solely approve a partial release or any other request related to your certificates, clearances, or permits. And that's because our colleagues in those offices are the experts, and it's up to them whether it's appropriate to release your funds. So to give you an outline of what to expect from the research ethics clearance process, I'd like to invite my colleague Harmony Peach, Manager of Research Ethics, to speak next. Harmony?
Thank you, Kate. So getting into the research ethics process, considering how you get ethical clearance, it's important to know where, I guess, our authority is derived from. So the Research Ethics Board, often referred to as the REB at the University of Windsor, derives its authority from the federal guidelines contained in the Tri-Council Policy Statement, Ethical Conduct for Research Involving Humans. We also often refer to that as the TCPS2. And all universities who receive funding from the Tri-Council must have an independent REB responsible for the ethical oversight of all research with human participants conducted by faculty, staff, or students. And that's regardless of whether or not the projects are funded or where the research takes place. So research involving humans, their data, or their biological materials or some combination thereof will likely require REB clearance, again, whether or not the research is funded. And researchers will need to complete their TCPS2 core certificate and submit it along with their application for research ethics clearance at the University of Windsor. You can find that information on our website, which I provided here below. And there's more details as well about filling out that TCPS2 certificate, the process that you have to undertake for doing the TCPS2 core certificate. So any research involving humans conducted by any member of the research team affiliated with the University of Windsor or that uses resources at the University of Windsor must either be wholly cleared or conditionally cleared, which means that, some portion of the research can begin with some conditions and then later on fully cleared, or provided with exemption from the University of Windsor's REB before the research project can begin. If you're not sure about whether or not you need ethical clearance, other institutions, Kate also made mention of this as well, might refer to this as ethical approval. We would certainly encourage you to contact the Office of Research Ethics for clarification. And as Kate mentioned, getting in touch with us early on in the process or in the planning stages of your application can be very helpful, and certainly saving you time when it comes down to when the review actually takes place. So when submitting applications, there are different forms to fill out for different purposes, and not all research projects seeking ethical clearance require submission to be completed on the main application form, though typically new research projects collecting new data involving humans or their biologicals will use our main application form. But we have other forms, the secondary use of data forms for non-health and health-related research. Those are typically filled out when the data being used in the current project that you're seeking clearance for had been previously collected for other purposes. We've also got researchers on campus who use commercial human somatic cell lines, and you can complete the corresponding request for exemption form for that particular type of research. And this is also necessary for approval from the Research Safety Committee as well. And if you require other approvals from the Research Safety Committee, I think it's also important to note that these should be received before you apply to the REB. Again, you can find all of our necessary forms for the various research projects on our website, additional information on our policies as well. And then Kate also mentioned the partial release of funds form. All of that's available on the website, provided there in the slide. So again, Kate talked about partial release of funds, and how does this relate with the REB? Again, typically funding is not released for research projects until ethical clearance has been received. But again, you may have, a necessary reason why you need to get some funds earlier or access those funds earlier ahead of full REB clearance. Hiring an RA, purchasing needed equipment. Again, Kate covered some of those things. It's really important to note that no recruitment and no data collection, essentially nothing involving prospective participants, can begin for a research project requiring ethical clearance until your application is reviewed and cleared, or you've been provided with conditional clearance. And again, that sort of means in its entirety. So we do go through a process of reviewing the partial release of funds, but you still require full clearance or conditional clearance and or exemption in order to begin any research activities involving participants. Generally, the ethical review and clearance for a research project takes about 4 weeks. And this is from the time that we receive a completed, we often say reviewable application, and from the date of the corresponding scheduled available review time. So there are review times posted on our website. If something is submitted after review takes place, for instance, then it would fall in line with the next possible review date, again, provided that the application that is completed is received. So any applications that require additional information before the review can take place, obviously that's going to extend the amount of time that it's going to take for a review to take place. So submitting a fully completed application, you want to include all your necessary appendices, any of your other necessary permissions, other clearances or approvals from other institutions that you've received, as well as your funding agreements. And that also includes like lists of all of the members of your research team, and it'll depend as requested depending on which form you're filling out as well. But you want to include things like your RAs, any students who are going to participate in the research side of things, any administrators that are on the project. If you've got other folks who are assisting, for instance, with recruitment because you've got some dual roles that you're trying to manage. And you also want to really present a robust consideration of the risks and benefits, as well as your consent process. All of this is really helpful for expediting your application for REB clearance. It can also be the case that you're not sure or you don't know certain information. So for instance, you plan on hiring an RA, but you're not sure the identity of who that RA is going to be. So we would require a TCPS2 for the RA, and we would require knowing the identity, for instance, of the RA. But this is one of those instances where if you give us as much information as possible, then you may be able to proceed with the research on conditional clearance, and then you would just follow up with the RAB and send us that information once it's available. I'm also going to talk a little bit more about funding agreements on the next slide. But first, I think that you might find it helpful to note that the REB at the University of Windsor applies the principle of proportionate review in its approach. And this is in line with the TCPS2. Essentially, that means that the more invasive and risky the research, the greater should be the care in assessing the research. So generally, as a preliminary first step, the level of review is determined by the level of risk. Again, presented by the research. The lower the level of risk, the lower the level of scrutiny. And at the University of Windsor, we call that delegated review. The higher level of risk, the higher level of scrutiny. And we would reference that as sort of a full board review. Either level of review essentially involves consideration of foreseeable risks and potential benefits, and then the ethical implications of the research. For Windsor, we have both a socio-behavioral and a biomedical board for full board reviews. And a delegated review committee for minimal risk applications and various other delegated review practices, including executive review. And this essentially means review by the chair. And we also have several ad hoc committees, as well as specialized reviewers where expertise is required on a specific application. You can find submission deadlines and upcoming review dates for both the regular delegated review committee and both of the full boards posted on the REB website. The Delegated Review Committee meets weekly during the fall and winter months, and the full board meets monthly. So when you're thinking about planning for when you want to submit, and you know you've got that roughly 4-week timeline, it's helpful if you visit the website ahead of your submission. So what does the REB need to know with respect to your funded project? The REB is going to ask you about whether or not your project is funded, and there are both ethical and practical reasons for this. Ethically, the REB wants to know whether there are funding contracts in place and what sort of terms have been set out by the funder that could result in implications for the participants and their data. So the REB will want to cross these terms against, again, the ethical principles as set out in the TCPS2. And again, that informs the REB's oversight. But it's also going to want to look at those terms against the consent process that you've outlined in your project in order to ensure that the terms are clear to participants. So for example, your funding contract might call for identifiable data to be retained in the funder's database for an unlimited term, say for instance. And this particular example creates ethical implications around privacy, confidentiality. There are data risks to consider. There is future use of the data that you would likely need to get some consent about. And again, that just names a few in that one particular instance. So reviewing the funding contract is essential to the ethical review process undertaken on your application by the REB. Practically speaking, as Kate addressed, the REB works closely with ORIS, and providing grant account numbers to the REB, if you know them, helps our offices to link accounts and communicate on files that are funded. If you don't know your account number right off the bat or at the time of applying to the REB, there's a place on the application to note this. And then the REB, again, this would be one of those situations where it could be a conditional clearance, or it might just be a condition that you would notify the REB once you have that information available. Something to be aware of, or I think to consider when you do enter into a funding contract with your funder, is that they often will set out confidentiality terms that could actually hinder the ethical review process. So, for instance, some funders might request your confidentiality with regard to the agreements themselves in terms of who you can share the funding agreement with or not. And it is the REB's position very clearly that clearance cannot be provided until any funding agreements associated with the research project have been reviewed. And again, this is due to those potential ethical implications, in that example that I highlighted there, but there could be other ethical implications as well. Information that could be helpful for you should you find yourself having to navigate a discussion with a funder about sharing the funding contract with the REB, is that all members of the REB, as well as the administrative staff, are held to strict confidentiality and all sign confidentiality agreements as well. Again, if you're unsure about whether your project may need clearance or have concerns or questions, we certainly encourage you to reach out to us directly. This is either we call it the Research Ethics Board, but also the Office of Research Ethics can handle any of the questions that you might have for the REB at ethics@uwindsor.ca. And finally, when your project's final clearance has been issued, you will get a notification email from our office with a formal letter of clearance listing the terms of your clearance and/or conditional clearance. So for research funding awarded that stipulates pending ethics approval, communications occur again between the Office of Research Ethics and the Office of Research and Innovation Services indicating ethics clearance has been issued. And that's when, as Kate mentioned, ORAS authorizes the opening of the research account. So ethics clearances are issued for a maximum period of 12 months only from the date that's on issue of your clearance letter. And what this means is that ethical clearance has to be updated at least on an annual basis. And it could be that your research project requires, terms be sooner than 12 months. But they will always only be good for 12 months unless there's something stipulated in your clearance. So the process for you continuing your clearance past 12 months is that at least once a year, you absolutely must submit a progress report to the Office of Research Ethics. And that's, again, in order to have your clearance extended. If the project ends prior to 1 year from the date of your initial clearance letter, then you submit a final report. And you could be notified by email from the office around the time that things are expiring, that either you need to provide a progress report or a final report. And at that time, it would be expected that you would complete them and submit them. Also, a progress report has to be submitted for each funded project prior to the release of any additional funds associated with that project. So this process essentially gets repeated every year until the project is finished, which is when you send the final report. So the clearance issued again on a progress report only valid for 12 months at a time. So you just continue that process. It's also important, I think, to note that if progress and final reports are not submitted on time, essentially research projects are considered out of compliance. So I think the takeaway is, if you do have any questions or concerns, visiting the REB website, contacting the Office of Research Ethics for clarity early on in the planning stages of your project can certainly be very helpful. I'm actually now going to hand things over to my colleague, Amy Taylor, who is the Executive Assistant to the Vice President of Research and Innovation, who will talk a bit about hiring personnel.
Thanks, Harmony. Okay, so finally, once your project's final clearance has been issued, you're notified by email. Oh, excuse me, I'm still on Harmony's slides here. My apologies. So once you have your grant account set up and you have received all of the required clearances, you may want to hire some people to assist you with your research. The first thing My apologies. The first thing you will need to do is select the right type of research appointment. There are two basic categories of research appointments: student appointments and non-student appointments. To qualify for a student research appointment, an individual must be registered as a graduate or an undergraduate student at the University of Windsor at any level. Students can be paid hourly, by salary in even increments, or by scholarship in a lump sum. If you are hiring a student to assist with your research, you can pay through casual wages, hourly, or by salary. Scholarship should only be used if you are hiring a student to conduct their own research, further their training to become an independent researcher, or to assist them in completing their degree, or to provide financial assistance that will allow the student to focus on their graduate degree. The work performed by a student paid by scholarship may be complementary to your research program, but should focus on the student's own academic pursuits. All student research appointments are processed by Human Resources. Appointment forms and relevant information on student research appointments and other types of student employment, including information on hiring GAs and TAs, can be found on the Human Resources website. Non-student research personnel, including research assistants, research associates, postdoctoral fellows, and visiting scholars, are appointed through the Office of the Vice President, Research and Innovation. Non-student research personnel must be paid from a grant account. Appointments can be part-time at 24 hours per week or less, or full-time at 25 to 44 hours per week, with a total term of up to 1 year. An individual can hold more than one research appointment at a time from more than one supervisor, but the total hours worked per week cannot exceed 44. Appointees can be paid either hourly or by stipend as a salary in even increments. And if the appointee will work full-time for the full year, you can also choose to pay benefits for your appointee. Non-student research personnel appointed by the Office of the Vice President, Research and Innovation must be directly engaged in research. This means that they cannot, This means that they cannot be hired to perform duties that are primarily supportive in nature, including work that is technical, clerical, or administrative in nature. This said, it is understood that most positions will include minor tasks that are technical, clerical, or administrative in nature. For example, an individual who will spend the majority of their time collecting samples and analyzing them, but is also required to spend some of their time processing the samples, could be hired as non-student research personnel. A converse example would be an individual who will spend the majority of their time working on activities such as conference planning, website development, and data entry. This kind of position cannot be hired as non-student research personnel. When hiring research personnel, it is very important to determine how much of an individual's time will be spent on supportive activities that are technical, clerical, or administrative in nature. While you can recruit your own non-student research personnel who will be directly engaged and will be directly and primarily engaged in research, all positions that are primarily technical, clerical, or administrative in nature must be reviewed, evaluated, and posted by HR, regardless of whether or not they are paid from a grant account. If you're unsure if the duties that your appointee will be performing meet the criteria for a non-student research appointment, please reach out to either myself or Sandy Mahanka in the Office of the Vice President, Research and Innovation for clarification. Once you're sure that you have selected the right type of appointment and have a candidate that you would like to hire, you will need to complete and submit a request for research or postdoc appointment package and submit it to your department head, dean, and research finance for authorization. We recommend that you begin this process at least 1 month in advance of the appointment start date. Relevant forms and detailed instructions are available on the VPRI website. Information on the appointment of foreign nationals is also available on the VPRI website. Because foreign nationals typically require a work permit to work in Canada on our campus and in the position that you are hiring them for, and because processing times may vary from country to country, it is very important that you begin the appointment process well before the individual's anticipated start date. In some cases, work permit processing times can be several months. Typical wait times can be found on the Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada website. So it is important to remember that research personnel must hold an active appointment, meaning that an appointment contract has been issued, signed, and returned, and that the individual has been set up as a University of Windsor employee before they can begin working with you. We realize that the process of appointing research personnel can sometimes take quite a bit of time, sometimes up to a month or more, which is why we recommend that you begin the process well in advance of the individual's anticipated start date. If you have an individual begin working for you before you complete the appointments process, they may think that they are already a University of Windsor employee. However, until the appointment process is complete, the individual that you are hiring is not considered a University of Windsor employee, regardless of whether or not they have started working for you, which means that they are not yet covered by any of the insurances afforded to University of Windsor employees. And in the event of an accident, they would not be covered. There are many reasons also, this is also important information, there are also many reasons why you might want to end an appointment early, such as resignation by the employee or a lack of funding. A non-student research appointment will not officially end until a notice has been issued by the OVPRI, which means that the individual will continue to be paid until the notice is issued. If you're considering ending an appointment early, please contact me as soon as possible. To end a student research appointment early, please contact Human Resources. Okay, so before I wrap this up and hand this over to Paige for her part of the presentation, I just want to direct you to some key contacts. For any questions related to student personnel, please contact the Office of Human Resources. And I see that there are some questions. I think we'll get to those at the end once everybody has finished their presentations. Also, for non-student research personnel, you can contact Sandy Mahanka, who is the Secretary to the Vice President, Research and Innovation in our office, or myself. Again, I'm going to reiterate what everybody else has said. If you have questions or you're unsure about any of the steps in the process, please feel free to contact us even before you get going with recruitment and hiring of your research personnel. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Paige Sowerby, who is the Manager Restricted Funds in our Research Finance Department. Paige, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Just taking over control here now. So I'm just going to flip the slide. So I just want to go over a few things. So now we've got our grant funding. We will issue from the Research Finance, issue that letter that Kate had brought to your attention. And that's just allowing you to know which department, which project number, as well as the detailed budget that will go along with your grant. However, the first few things that you will need to make sure before you start spending on your account is ensuring that basically follows these 4 principles. 1, it contributes to the direct costs of the research activities and activities for which the funds were awarded. They're effective and economical. So we're not just going out and buying the newest, fanciest thing that's not allowing us any additional benefit. We're wanting to make sure we are using external parties and internal funding as effectively and economically as possible, as well as we do not result in personal gain from members of the research team. So these costs are going directly for the research and not benefiting an individual, a part of the team, and are eligible costs within the grant agreement. So when you get your agreement, sometimes there will be strict restrictions on what you can spend your funding on. So if we get a Tri-Council grant, say just a discovery, we put in the proposal, and then after that, those 4 or 3 points we'll need to adhere it to. So we're able to spend it, making sure that we're spending our money directly on research costs, that we're economical and effective, and we're not resulting in personal gain. However, you may get an external contract that is very specific. So there could be, say, $10,000 dedicated to two or one RA. Then there could be $5,000 dedicated to travel. We need to make sure when you are expending on this grant that you are following those guidelines. So when you receive that budget, it will be in relation to the budget that's submitted in the external contract, and you are spending accordingly to that budget that has been agreed upon. If you have any questions about kind of where you sit on the funding, you can reach out to resfinance@uwindsor.ca or your project manager that will be listed on your statement of account that you will receive on a monthly basis. So that's kind of the four main things we want to do before we start spending to ensure that they are going to be eligible expenses in the end. So the next step will be how to spend your research funds. So the first thing is to set up payroll, as Amy has went through the types of different appointments. Once you get those contracts, please ensure, like Amy said, that these are being done before a student or employee is working. There will be some time for processing. So when you get your original contract, sometimes we will need to provide kind of that project number prior to everything being set up if you're needing that student to start, say, September 1st. So if you know your grant account is starting September 1st, and you need someone to start on that September 1st, and you've received all your clearance, you're just waiting for your project account to set up, you will see that we will send out that letter that will have the date or the project number on it, but it will allow you to know that your funding will not be released until September 1st, if that's the start date. However, that does not mean that you cannot start the paperwork for these appointment forms, because these people will not be charged or not be expended to your project until that September 1st start date. So this will ensure that all the paperwork can be done prior to the beginning of your grant. The next thing would be a P card linked to your grant account. So you can get a purchase card, one card for all of the grants that you have within your portfolio. What is nice about a P card is that the university will pay for the charges. You simply charge the card, and then you must go into CenterSuite and make sure you apply it to the appropriate project if you have multiple projects. So that is very important that you do that on a monthly basis. So then the charge will go into the appropriate project account when it gets processed. With this P card upload, this does only occur once a month. So just make sure if you are getting an updated balance from a research finance office, if you know that there is some P card charges, it might not be reflected in that balance currently because it will do it on the month upload into the system. So there could be some timing difference there when you're getting an updated balance from research finance. The next thing is one also thing I want to say with the P card. These are for charges that are under $2,500. If there's anything over, you need to go through the purchase order or purchase requisition method. The next step, though, is a travel card. So if you plan on traveling with your grant funding, please also get a travel card. The travel card is slightly different, as the travel card is you charge your expense to it. However, it is the responsibility of the card holder to make the payment. So in order to make the payment, you can pay for it out of pocket and then submit a travel reimbursement report, or you can ensure you have a timely submission of your travel support or submission. So then you can get that money back and pay off your card accordingly. So that's the two main differences between the P card and the travel card when it comes to the payment. A P card, the university will pay it on a monthly basis, where the travel card, the responsibility of payment is the card holder. The next step would be using a purchase order or purchase requisition. So this allows for you to go into UInsight and submit kind of your invoice or your quote in order for the system and the university to be able to pay the vendor directly. And this will allow you to not have to pay anything out of pocket. The one main thing I would like to bring to everyone's attention is ensuring that the supplier is set up. If it is a new supplier, you will need to go in and request a request to add a vendor to the system. So we can add that supplier on the system, and then you're able to put through the purchase order directly to them. The last option would be to purchase using your personal debit or credit card and then get reimbursed from your grant account. So that is the link I have here about submitting an expense report. So once you have the charge, you will need to ensure that you have all the appropriate supporting documentation, so the invoice, the receipt, and upload that to your expense report submission, and it will go through UInsight. So once you submit it to UInsight, it will go through the proper approvals to ensure that there's one-up approval, and then research finance, if it's going to a research finance project, and then it will go to AP for processing. And just want to clear one thing too with the expense reports. We need to make sure all the supporting documentation is there, or it will come back to yourself. And then once the payment is approved by AP, it will then be directly deposited into your bank. So I just have a friendly reminder here. Just make yourself familiar with UInsight Finance. There is a lot of knowledge-based articles on our website, but if you do have any questions, please reach out to Res Finance, and we can assist you with any matters you might have. Okay, the next thing is your financial obligations. So the PIs are responsible for conducting their research as indicated in the proposal of the grant and the overall sound administration of all research funds allocated to them. So please ensure the proper allocation of research funds and sound financial management, ensuring compliance with the terms and conditions governing the grant and contract, ensuring that expenditures do not exceed the value of the award, and ensuring all financial reports prepared by Research Finance as required by the sponsor are carefully reviewed and approved. I have a link here for the responsibilities of the principal investigator that is on our website that Kate had talked about prior, but just making sure that any allocation of the funds, if all of a sudden you have a grant and that money, it seems like it should go to another account, that's your responsibility. So say your P card, your charge went through and you forgot to go into Center Suite and apply it to the correct project account. That can be corrected by reaching out to your project manager or your admin team and putting a journal entry through our PostMyGE portal to put that expense into the proper category. We're needing to ensure that every expense within there is eligible. So we don't want to go in to the final report and maybe that expense was for another project and moving it after the fact, especially when projects end at different times. It's very important that on a monthly basis, the expenditures that have been charged to your research project are reviewed, because everything that we can do on a more timely basis will allow for less headache down the road when we go to do reporting or to finalize the end of the projects. So here I have you reviewing your grants. So on a monthly basis, the PI on the account will receive this statement of account that I have on the right side here. You will also receive a transaction details of the charges against your project account that you can review. So both will be in a PDF and you can review each of them. And if there is any issues with anything that you see within these contracts, or if you want to start discussing because you know that it's getting to the end of the contract, please reach out to your project manager, which is always listed at the bottom of the statement of account. So you'll have the project manager's name that's assigned to your department, as well as the email that they can be contacted by. These statement of accounts and expenditures, they will come from FIS production at uwindsor.ca and BIP collections at yoracle.com. So these grants will come through our automated system. So just be careful that they're not coming directly from, say, a Res Finance email box, that these are the legit emails and they're not spam. So when it comes to your statement of accounts, there's a few things that I would like to draw your attention to. So on the top right-hand corner, you'll see that there's a start date and an end date. So that end date is very important, as that will be the end date that you can spend on the project currently. So if that spend date is coming close and you are still needing to spend on that contract, please reach out to your research coordinator, and then they can go through the process of receiving an extension. Once that end date has passed, there can no longer be spending to the current account. So Research Finance will need to receive an approval to extend that date in order for you to charge additional amounts to the grant. Once that spend date is passed, the account will not be allowed to receive any additional expenses to it. So that's where we want to keep an eye out if you know something is coming due, and that there is still time to needed to spend down the grant. You're still ongoing activities. Please reach out to your coordinator, because we cannot just automatically extend it. We need that approval from the sponsors. Ensure that they are okay with expenditures past that date, because once that date occurs, that's a hard stop, and we could be putting expenses to these grants that are not eligible, and therefore we would not receive funding when we go to report, and we would have to cover that deficit. So that's very important that that end date is always adhered to. Additionally, you will see the project number. So whenever you're submitting, say, expense report, journal entry, a charge to this account, the project number, also known as the grant account number, that 6-digit number starting with 8, is very important, because that's the unique identifier of your each project, as well as with the organization, you will see the department code. So whenever you're putting anything through, that 4-digit number that Kate had referenced is also very important. The next table you'll see has a few different drop downs, and this will be changed grant by grant depending on what is required with this grant. So this is just some additional information. The most importantly, I would say, would be the return of funds account or category. So this is what's allowing you to know what happens at the end of the grant. So many of the times this will say return access funds. So the return access funds means that at the end of the grant, whatever is not spent must be returned. If it's a silent contract, that means at the end of the grant, those funds then can move into maybe your overhead account, or an extension can be provided within this project account, because it is saying that we can extend the date, those funds remain with you. But when it says unspent funds return access funds, that means that at the end of the project, the balance sits at this statement of account date. At the end is what needs to be returned to the agency. So just knowing that what happens at the end will just allow you to ensure that you're aware of where the money will flow, or if you are able to kind of keep the money. But if it's a return access funds, once that grant account is completed, that money will be returned to the agency. Additionally, we were talking a lot about some partial releases. So if there is a partial release, you will see a hold code on there. So if we are still waiting, say, for clearance, you will see a spending hold code up in that top little grid, and it will say waiting REB clearance. That will allow you to know that we are still waiting on clearance before you can spend from the account. Your account will be set to 0. And so the bottom part there where it says funds available, it will remain at 0 until the clearance is obtained and the budget can be released to you, or if there's a partial release. So say you know your grant was $10,000 and you look here and your funds available is sitting at 0. You can go up to the top and say, oh, because there's still that REB clearance. We're still waiting on that before the budget can be released to myself. So that's just kind of something to keep an eye out, just so you can see the process. If say there was a follow-up needed, or say you have received clearance, this is just not updated yet, please bring that to our attention to ORAS and Res Finance, and we will correct that for you. And another category within this top table that's very important is the overhead. So if you have overhead to a contract, which I will review later in the slides, you will see a percentage there, or it will say as specified in the contract. If there is overhead to the grant, within this breakdown of all the expenses, you will see the overhead line near the bottom. If the actual expenditures does not have a value, then that means the overhead has not been applied. So that is something that you need to still take into effect in your funds available balance. We are trying to start always taking the overhead at the beginning of the project, just so we know what is remaining in the account is what is available for you to spend. because there's nothing worse than getting to kind of the end of the project and thinking you have, say, maybe $30,000 left, and then you find out it's only 20. We never want to see that. So here we're trying to take it away at the beginning, out of your project account, so you know that it's already gone. But if you do see a balance of 0, just know that that journal entry is still pending. The table in the middle will give you the expenses of the current month that it's reporting in the first column, and then the expenditures to date in the second. In the third column, this is anything that's been committed. So on this line, you will see in the VIP interface, there is a value for salaries that is outstanding commitments. So those are any payroll commitments that you have on file. So they are contracts that have been signed and agreed upon, but we have not paid them yet. And that's something that will be paid in the future. So that gets taken away from your funds available balance, just so we know the funds available balance is capturing what all expenses are currently in the system that have been committed or already spent. So at the bottom, your funds available balance will be your budgeted amount, less any expenditures to date, less any items that have been that are outstanding commitments. So they've been committed in the system, but not yet paid. So that funds available is your balance to spend currently. And when it comes to the total budget, when funds get added to your project, you will see that total budget increase. This is not the total budget for the full project. It is the total budget that has been released to you. So if you have a contract that releases so much per year, you will see that funding increase per year for the allotment that you are able to spend on during that term. Okay. So those are the next thing I just want to talk about is overhead. So overhead that I discussed in the last slide is often eligible expense by the sponsors, and they set the rules on the rate. However, our standard university overhead rate is 40% on external contracts and invoices. This rate will then vary depending on the negotiation in the contract. So sometimes a sponsor may come and say, we will only require 20% overhead, then that will be adjusted within your contract and 20% will be applied. This will be approved by the sponsor and then ultimately by VPRI in the end while they are negotiating that contract. So the overhead costs will be charged to your grant account and are allocated as follows. So 25% will be redirected into your personal overhead account. So of that amount that has been expensed to your project account, 25% will be redirected for you to cover your other indirect costs of your research within your overhead account. And then 52.5 goes to your faculty dean, and 22.5 goes to the VPRI to cover the indirect costs of research to allow for the research to take place. Okay, the next thing is when we see that funds available, if any time that goes into a deficit, that means your account is an overspent position. So you must ensure that your available funds are not overspent, and you shall work with research finance to make necessary arrangements should this occur. If you're nearing the end of your funding, please reach out to your project manager to confirm the remaining funds if you're unsure of the balance before spending. A cost can be split between multiple projects as long as it's an eligible expense for each project to fully spend out the contract without putting the account in a deficit. So if you're going to a project, going at the end of the project and say you only have 1,000 left, but you have an expense for 2,000, that can get split between multiple accounts. And then bring that account to 0. So this is something you can work with research finance. As we know, it's not always easy to spend right on the dollar. So we can make sure we make that necessary arrangements to fully spend out the project and allocate it to the accounts that you need. Okay. So again, at the end of the grant and unspent funds, as I discussed in the statement of accounts, principal investigators are responsible for being aware of when their grant ends and what the sponsor's funding policy is on unspent funds. So if it is a return of access funds or a silent contract, you will see that in your statement of accounts, and just be aware when that timing comes for the end date of the contract. If a request for an extension is needed, the PI is advised to contract the research coordinator in ORIS to facilitate the formal request to the agency. Like I said previously, we aren't able to just grant an extension. There has to be conversation with the sponsor to ensure that we can extend that grant, and they will ensure that those expenses for the additional period are eligible and can be refunded. Okay. And the final thing I'd like to discuss is the reporting. So the PIs are responsible for being aware of the reporting requirements that are in the research grant contract. However, Research Finance will compile these financial reports for you. We will pull the necessary information into the template that's required, but we do ask for you, if the sponsor has provided you with a template or requested a report, please forward this on to your project manager to assist in the completion. Once we complete it, we will send it to the PI for their review and ensure that everything is accurate. The PIs will then be responsible for completing the progress and deliverable reports. So when it comes to non-financial items, that will be the PI's responsibility to review and complete. However, Research Finance will be there to help pull all your financial data together in order to report. So I just have a quick action list here. So if you have not done so, setting up a purchasing card for small purchases makes it a lot easier on your day-to-day. And then if you are going to travel, make sure you have a travel card. Again, it allows you to not use your personal and be able to travel on behalf of the university. And then if you're going to process your own POs and invoices to do a purchase requisition or purchase order, you can submit a finance ticket. So everything in TDX will be UInsight Finance, and you can get access to the self-service procurement model. So there is just a couple different drop downs there. When you go into the TDX ticket, you'll be able to say that you need to have access to the self-service procurement model to do purchase orders and purchase requisitions. There's just a link here, so some knowledge-based articles and brief handouts, as well as asking your teams if you need assistance, or asking your project manager or res finance at uwindsor.ca. We will assist you in anything that you need help with. Okay. And here we just have some key contacts. So the Office of Vice President Research and Innovation, VPRI, UWindsor, ORIS, the Research Ethics, and then my office here, the Res Finance at uwindsor.ca. Perfect. I will hand it back over to Kate.
Hey, thank you so much, Paige. I know that's a lot to take in, everybody, but like I said, don't forget that this is going to be recorded, so you can go back and listen to it all again later if you need to. So like everybody has mentioned a couple of times each in this presentation, really the best thing you can do to make sure that everything runs smoothly with your research is to get in touch with us early on in the process, whether it's applying for your grant or working on hiring your research personnel, or getting your clearance, or dealing with financial concerns that are coming up for you. The sooner you get in touch with us, the more support we're able to provide. So that's I think the most important thing. If you take away one thing today, it's to get in touch with us as soon as a problem or a concern or a question arises, and not wait until things have gotten more difficult to deal with. So we've allocated a little bit of time here for a Q&A session. Before we get started, I really just want to thank everybody for taking time out of your day to join us for this. We do hope you found it useful, that it's answered some of your questions. We know you may have other things that are coming up for you in your projects. They may be questions about things we've covered and you just want more details. We might have missed something that's important to you, or really any aspect of grant and research funding that's causing you headaches or heartburn or whatever. You can either post your questions in the chat, or you can use the raise hand function to voice your question. I will be kind of moderating our Q&A here. The first question is going to be for Paige. We have a question in the chat. Can you please explain more about the 25% PI's overhead?
Okay. Yep. So what will happen is when overhead is charged, it will be expensed to your project account, and then it will be redirected into those accounts. So 25% of what is being taken out of your research grant will be going into your overhead account. So as basically it's getting expensed in your project, you will see 25% of that growing in your overhead account. So on your statement of account, you will see that you will get a statement that is a project account that's directly a PI overhead account. And that budget will keep increasing by the 25% of the overhead that is being taken on projects. Is that?
Paige, can you clarify what a PI's overhead account is, how they access it, what things they can charge to it?
Yep. So PI overhead account will be an internal account that's set up. So it will be the exact same as what you would have for any research grant. It will have a 6-digit number starting with an 8, but it will be assigned directly to you with your name on it that you can use for kind of the indirect costs of research, other research activities that aren't maybe fall right under your project account. So as long as anything that's going for research purposes, you can charge that overhead account. So it basically goes into a pot of fund that's not restricted for you. So it still needs to be expenditures for your research program, but it doesn't have restrictions like an internal contract does. So it's kind of a pool of your money all in one account to spend from.
Okay, thanks, Paige. Hussein, does that answer the question that you had? Looks like he says thanks in the chat, so I think we're good on that one. Excellent. Okay, does anybody else have questions about accessing your funds, about hiring, about how to make purchases? You have the experts assembled before you here, and if we don't know the answers, then we know who does know them, and we can redirect you. Again, feel free to either post in the chat or raise your hand to say your question into your microphone.
I might just comment on one. I see that Hussein has,
Yeah,
and
sure.
also grants are charged only 3% taxes, which is great. So just to let everyone know is when you charge an account, you'll be charged the subtotal of the invoice plus it's 3.041%, but that's the portion of the non-refundable tax. So that's the charge that you will see come through your project account. So it's a subtotal plus the non-refundable tax. The difference between what you paid and that amount goes to a recoverable HST account, and the university deals with that. So if you pay out $2,000, but it had HST, you will not see that $2,000 charge go against your grant account. It will just be the subtotal plus the 3%, approximately, just to kind of give a little more clarity there on that 3%.
Thanks, Paige. Our next question is the chat is who can I ask about the string account number? Jane, that'll be sent to you in an email. Just going back to early in our slides, let me see if I can, oh, maybe it's faster to go this way. So Research Finance, after they've opened your grant account, is going to send you an email that'll include a document called your grant letter. And the chart of account string is in the table that has all of your information in it. So your grant account number will always start with 08. That means that it's a research grant account, followed by your department code, 4 digits. And the grant account number is the 6-digit code starting with the number 8. If you lose track of this email and you need to know what your grant account number is, you should usually be able to find it in the URSO record related to that project. Or if you're having trouble, you can also email resfinance@uwindsor.ca to get that grant account number.
And then I'm also just sending a quick link here on a knowledge base article that just describes your natural account numbers. So if you are trying to link to, say, a certain natural account, that would be the 5-digit number at the end of your account string. But when you are putting something into the system, you get to do it on expenditure on the type or on the name. So you'll just see computer. You can just hit computer. You do not have to know the digit numbers when you're putting through an expense report. The system will know and add those numbers for you.
Okay, and a question from Sharon. As there are not a lot of attendees today, do you plan to offer this session again soon that we can advise people to take? Sharon, we don't have another session planned right now. Unfortunately, these sessions are something that it's hard to get into our schedules outside of the summer months. However, we have recorded the session and we'll be posting the recording onto the ORIS website. I will share the link with everybody who registered for today's session. So if there are folks in your faculty, your department who need to refer to the recording or the transcript, those will be available online.
And there will be, I know, another kind of training session that we're talking about for new faculty training. So maybe we could also link that onto the website to help
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
people.
Do you have the date of that session page?
I'm meeting with them this afternoon, so I can message in this group when they're confirmed, because it was originally going to be around this time, but it has got delayed. So it will kind of cover similar stuff, but a little more in depth about the expenditure processes.
Sharon, I can absolutely share the slide deck with you. I was going to post it along with the video. So the slide deck will be posted there. That way you can click on all the hyperlinks that are in it and find all the links really easily. Okay, well, we have time for a couple more questions if anybody has anything else. But if there are no other kind of burning questions right at this moment, we'll let you get back to your afternoon. Again, don't forget that you can reach out to any of us at any time using the key contacts that we've posted here. Or again, if you're looking for kind of more help figuring out how to get a grant in the first place, don't forget that you can reach out to your research coordinator at the Office of Research and Innovation Services. They are absolutely going to be the best people to figure out where to get funding from and how to write a high quality proposal. So if no further questions, thanks again, everybody, for your time today. And I hope you found the session useful. I also want to thank Paige, Harmony, and Amy for getting together with me to present this session. Appreciate their time. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And good luck with everyone's research. And look forward to working with everyone during the projects. Thank you.